there's not just the imperative to accrue power to dominate and to survive in nature, even in nature. There is also generosity, compassion, love, the forging of bonds that are not contingent upon evolutionary advantage. Um, and at the end of the day, the discourse of power, I just find, becomes more and more vapid, more and more banal, the more you try to apply it to that experience. And if one can learn to see things the way Christ has taught one to see them, even in just fugitive glimpses, I think it's impossible then to go back to this discourse of suspicion with real credence. I mean, you look at it and it begins to look absurd. I mean, much sillier than the claim that no, there really is a moral structure to reality in which we participate to the degree that we love others.
Solomon and Smith. Welcome to Solomon and Smith. You're about to listen to a conversation between myself, Milo, and David Bentley Hart. David Bentley Hart did ask us in our email correspondence, which of you is Solomon, which of you is Smith? Neither of us is Solomon or Smith, but together, Milo and I are Solomon and Smith.
Hope to clear that one up. I know there's been a lot of discussion.
Sounds a bit like the Nicene Creed. This is a conversation about the origins of morality. Where does morality come from? Does it only apply to human beings? Does it also apply to animals? How about trees? Is morality applicable to droplets of water?
Consider the fearsome dinosaur, the terrifying, horrible eater lizard creature. Surely there is no morality in this beast of the abyss, the dinosaur with its sharp teeth and roving evil brain. David Bentley Hart thinks different.
Consider the evil waterfall. Consider its indifference to its droplet babies as it hurtles them into the abyss. Consider the cruelty of a river smashing its droplet babies on the rocks.
Don't like the sound of this. This isn't feeling bright and happy.
We think of the material universe as being somewhat free from moral considerations. Planets exploding, quasars, black holes, space rocks, space dust. You know, the majority of created things, what we call matter, we think of that as being completely abstracted from our moral concerns. But if you entertain the idea that consciousness saturates all things, including things which to us seem unconscious, you start to open up the idea that there is some application of morality to the entire cosmos, a transcendent application of it.
Yeah, it begs the question, did we destroy the moral universe to spare it from itself? Were we so aghast at the infinite cycling evils that seem to perpetuate themselves in and around nature as to simply take the moral coin away from them? To say this is not moral activity, good or bad, this is beyond good and evil, only thinking beings like ourselves need be concerned with making a moral decision. Because if we give penguins moral decision making, then we must consign them to hell, which makes us unhappy, I think. And easier that they are simply beyond hell and heaven, existing in this interesting middle stripe of existence. But perhaps no, perhaps the penguins do belong in hell. And David Bentley Hart will opine on that, perhaps indirectly, but we know what he's talking about. We're on top of this. We also talked to David Bentley Hart about the golden age of The Simpsons, which he gleefully quotes from at length, mentioning, I believe, The Simpsons as one of the great texts of human literature. So stay tuned for that in the second half.
Yeah, the interview is in two parts. So around the hour mark, we stop talking about morality and start talking about literature. David Bentley Hart opines on a few classic author duels. Who's better, Tolstoy or Dostoevsky? G.K. Chesterton or Oscar Wilde? Charles Dickens or George Eliot? The Song of Songs or Ecclesiastes? Stay tuned to find out.
Anything else? We talk about otters. There's
David-
a really, really large sort of extracted description of baseball. Why baseball is beauty. Baseball equals beauty. It does not represent beauty or point to beauty, but is in fact the form of beauty on earth. Had Plato seen baseball, David Bentley Hart strongly implies, he would have said, well, this form is physically existent and we can look at it. The other one's a little more sort of up in the ether, but the form of beauty obviously exists in this ball game.
Please like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for similar sort of in-depth chats about philosophy, literature, religion. Leave a comment down below. Where do you think morality comes from? If you'd like to support the continuation of these conversations and gain access to some exclusive content, you can also support me and Milo with the Patreon link down below. We're enormously grateful for all of your support. Thank you very much. Without any further ado, David Bentley Hart.
Quite old. Some of my sorry, I'm playing with things on my screen.
No, please.
I'll come. I'll be awake soon. I haven't had my coffee.
No, you're a late riser.
I was today. I had a sleepless night, and my alarm on my phone was set, I thought, for 9 a.m. It was actually set for 9 p.m., so it didn't wake me. So I'm a genius with things technical, of course. All right, forgive me. Now, what was the topic of this conversation again that we're contemplating, that we're edging our way towards? Are we recording at this moment?
Yeah, I've got it rolling, as they say.
All right. Well, try not to make me look too bad. You can put some chatter in there if you like, but use AI to make it seem much brighter than it was.
We always do. We always do.
I did notice in your last interview with me that I was a small blonde girl with pigtails and ribbons in her hair. I thought that was an enormously flattering portrait of the artist as a decaying old man. But yeah, we live in an age of miracles and wonders.
I'm going to read our poetic epigraph for this episode.
All
It's
right.
about 2 minutes long, so you can have a nice sleep, a nice nap. A child in a swing. Its stretched limbs sketch a bow, following a swallow's wings which slice the salivating meadow, swollen with extravagant sweetness, with harebells vetch, slow and yarrow, ringed by silver beeches and loud spring breeze. I watch clouds drift like subjectless pleas for nothing nameable, through quivering webbed leaves and wheezing shrubs, haunted by blue light, ruffled by bats, buzzards, kestrels, and kites. To create a universe without properties is the sole amoral act. Unbeing and being clustered in the softness of their suicide pact, torsos overcast with cotton, a world where all truth can contract into mustard or a fact. Oh, let all information be forgotten, and all the agony, greed, and inexpressible lack which saturates each pore of creation be freed as breath on a winter night, ascending to the constellations, annulled and melded with the spilled void. Creation is a hole that must be filled in order to be destroyed. How could God resist creating only that which cannot exist? To adequately love a thing smothered in petals of charge and longing demands an eternity of turmoil. You can never finish loving a piece of paper, a pebble, a fish, a woman, sand, or oil. You can only continuously begin ascending a mountain of dark grey gravity. The final object of all charity, the final belief of every believer, is non-being, stagnant ether. The child leaps from the swing and becomes a collared dove. O God, when you kill me, the part that can think, the part that can sing, leave the part that can love. Before we get on to serious topics like prose style and hobbits, I thought we should start with something a bit frivolous to get us warmed up. So what, David, are the origins of moral instincts, of morality, in animals, in humans, in pebbles? How deep does it go?
Well, first of all, it seems to me you should have cited the source of what you were reading. So I'm now in, I have to admit, suspense. Who was that?
That was me.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, I'm not beyond trying to impress David Bentley Hart.
Well, thank you, Jack. I was very taken with that, and I was thinking, is this a poet that I'm entirely unaware of? That seems impossible. Perhaps someone who hitherto has been, writing entirely in Serbo-Croatian, and you're a translator of remarkable gifts, and you're bringing him to light. But yes, thank you for that. That was very impressive. How deep does the moral instinct go, the moral impulse, the forces, the origins of morality?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I obviously, if I were just to answer the question metaphysically, I'd say that of course the good is convertible with being and all the transcendental, so everything is driven by the love that moves the sun and other stars, that everything is driven by this moral appetite. Even the crocodile, who, let's just imagine that he is a bit confused about the matter, devours his own young. Who among us has never had that temptation?
You make a good point.
Yeah.
The crocodile within us.
Your inner crocodile.
Maybe I could.
So
maybe I could narrow it down. Go on.
Well, no. Let me say this: it's the same as the appetite to know the truth, the appetite for beauty, and I think it is prodigally distributed throughout the created order. That I find, I'm a terrible sap. For instance, let's stick with animals for a moment. I'm a terrible sentimentalist when it comes to animals, and I there's one aspect of internet culture I'm unable to resist manfully, and that's videos of animals doing adorable things. Sometimes with children, sometimes with others of the kind, but often with other kinds of animals. A horse and a pig, a dog and a goose. Or dog and a duck. These are some I've seen recently. I had a dog who raised a cat as her daughter when I was a lad, and the tenderness of that relationship was extraordinary. And right there, if you're the sort of evolutionary ultra-Darwinist cynic, you can say that that these relations are simply confusions, that these animals lack the categories to distinguish. So my dog didn't know that the cat wasn't one of her own kind. But that dog, Laurie, was eager to adopt and to love any creature. She find a wounded bird and a wounded chipmunk. She was entirely devoid of feral instinct. I don't think she was confused. I admit that she may not have had fixed in her mind abstract categories like canine, rodent, feline. But the desire to love was super abundant in her, and it certainly seemed to exceed the imperatives of genetic survival, right? It was, you could say it was an epiphenomenon of that. Well, then it would be an extravagantly inefficient epiphenomenon, one that would divert her towards all sorts of creatures in whom she had no evolutionary stake. So I think morality, I know I've never liked making the moral first and foremost a sort of categorical imperative disjoined from affect, from love. Although I understand that sometimes you have to do what is right, even when you have no emotional investment in what you're doing. But I think in its true essence, morality is always already a genuine effect of a prior love that moves in us, that moves in all living things. And I think it's important to see it, to recognize it for what it is, because I think all moral intelligence comes from that, the knowledge that we're engaged not simply in following the rules, but that the rules, in fact, reflect this deeper need in each of us, first and foremost, to become ourselves by loving what is other than ourselves.
In your article,
was that too?
That was good. That was.
I've only had some coffee this morning, so I may not be operating at absolutely top condition. But go on.
In your article, The Confessions of an Irreligious Christian, you mentioned that there were sort of two main things that keep you identifying yourself as a Christian, despite having so many dispositional blocks between you and practices like prayer and so on. But one of them, I think, was the resurrection accounts, the uncanniness of the resurrection accounts. And another one was the interruption that Christ's moral teaching, or I suppose you could broaden that, his teaching in general, was stood for in the late antique world. Could you flesh that out a bit? What was the great Christian interruption to late antiquity?
Before I answer that, can I ask you a question that's of burning importance? Mm-hmm. We're all sitting in front of shoji screens, I've just realized. Did you do this because you were trying to honor my choice of my habitual choice of background, or is this pure coincidence?
I suspect it might be the origin of your power.
That's right, yeah. That's right. Damn it, I've been found out. All right. Well, yes, let me answer the question. First of all, yes, the uncanniness, before I talk about the second thing, the uncanniness of the resurrection accounts. This, of course, is an old enigma in historical studies of the earliest sources, and it's actually one of the things that Wolfhart Pannenberg, the evangelisch, the Lutheran theologian, often talked about is that something happened. I mean, it was not uncommon for there to be messianic movements, obviously, in the time of Christ, And when their founders passed, the movements dispersed and disappeared. And historic, because they were so grounded in the historical expectation in Christ's time of the imminent coming of the Son of Man, or the restoration of Israel, or whatever. The persistence of Christianity, or of the Christ movement after the death of Christ, does break an historical pattern. Now, that doesn't prove anything with absolute objectivity, because there are all sorts of contingencies in history. There might have been, but the best evidence is that there were men and women who were willing to die under the conviction that they had experienced Christ after the crucifixion. And Paul, when he discusses it in 1 Corinthians 15, does so with such documentary plainness, as if reciting facts that are already well known, and mentioning Christ being present with 500 followers at one time, that I can't just dismiss. I've never been able to dismiss it. I've always had this strange conviction that whatever happened went beyond a subjective experience, and certainly beyond some sort of premeditated set of lies. But you're right. The thing that has always consumed my attention when it comes to Christ is the ministry, and the way in which that alters the perspectives of those, say, who wrote the Gospels. I had a recent interview in the New York Times, so I don't want to recapitulate everything I said there, unless you're planning to rival the New York Times for circulation, in which case I'm willing to try to help you out. But again, it's not a complete break. What Christ taught was not a complete break with all precedent, the prophets of Israel, the moral teachings of Torah and Tanakh, the moral schools of the Hellenistic world, in which Israel and Judea and Galilee in the times of Christ fully immersed, had some very high and noble moral aspirations, especially among the Stoics, of a sort of universal city, a city of universal fraternity and sorority. But the teachings of Christ really are, in some ways, like a meteor suddenly dropping to Earth in the midst of and just disrupting historical continuity. He's not someone who teaches just compassion to the poor, or to a penny, a poor man, right? Mm. He's someone who takes a class that in the late antique world by everyone was considered beyond rescue, but not beyond a certain eleemosynary generosity, not beyond a certain degree of compassion, but wisely, prudently, one would not invest too much in them. The patochi, patokos, I mean, the very word means somebody who is bent down and in absolute abasement, trembling, someone who has nothing, someone who is utterly dispossessed. And he made them, in a way that really has little precedent, the absolute center of the moral universe he was constructing for his followers. This became even, it becomes especially clear in the original Greek of the Gospels, that I thought I knew before I wrote my New Testament translation, but found myself even more overwhelmingly confronted by the degree to which, just say, the Sermon on the Mount, the Lord's Prayer, the instructions on court, how much of this was simply him trying to look after, trying to guide, trying to give both spiritual comfort to, but actually concrete material advice to the poor, the oppressed. And the judgment scene in Matthew 25, as much as you have done it to one of these, the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. I don't think we always appreciate how unlike anything else we find in the literature of that time that is, how absolutely shattering that is of paradigms. It's just, it goes deeper, it goes farther. And it does alter human perspectives in a way that I don't think they naturally would have done. John's gospel obviously is the theological gospel in the sense that it's more theological commentary on Christ. So you don't have a catena of moral teachings that I do believe came from the oral tradition, that really are the words of Christ, however edited, the way you do in Matthew and Luke, that this draws on a real tradition of the master said this, or Jesus said, But even in John's gospel, and I've written about this so often that I also don't want to,
Sure.
because just the scene of the confrontation between Pilate and Jesus is simply unlike anything in late antiquity. There's simply the perspective of the gospel writer is that of someone who's looking at an image, a tableau that in the late antique world would have been very easy to interpret. Christ is condemned by, and remember, Pilate's a representative not just of a political order, the way we think today that, alas, Donald Trump represents American political power. Pilate also is part of in a sense, spiritual or religious order. The empire is also a sacred, hieratic reality within a hierarchy of divine and human powers that necessarily have their grades of eminence and their grades of authority. And Jesus simply would have been the loser, not simply in a practical sense, but to anyone in almost a moral and a spiritual sense. It would be understood that this ridiculous figure, especially when he comes the second time and he's been beaten and crowned with thorns and this object of mockery, is the one who stands in a position of, how can I put it, spiritual subordination of necessity. And yet in John's gospel, this is God incarnate, or the Logos made man. This is the robes that he's wearing, draped around, the crown of thorns, instead of looking like objects of mockery of Christ, somehow become objects of mockery of kings and emperors. And he triumphs in the end. Even his crucifixion in the gospel is already infused with the light of the resurrection in John. And the last we see of him in that 21st chapter of the gospel, which I think is super added to what was originally 20 chapters, but soon thereafter. I mean, it's not a much later forcible annex to the tale. The last one is that in being risen, he becomes capable of absolute forgiveness that annuls things that it should not have been possible to correct, such as Peter having betrayed him. Peter denies him 3 times over an anthrachia, a charcoal fire in the courtyard of Caiaphas's house, and over that an anthrakia there on the shore in the sand. He makes Peter declare his love for him 3 times, and so the past is done away with. All of this makes it impossible for me not to be preoccupied entirely. I mean, at a very deep level with the person of Christ. I just the way he transformed the perspectives of his time is to me an epochal event that might not have, there might not be any other like it in the history of the world that we know. There are epochal events, like the French Revolution, but they're small and local by comparison to this. The whole universe of moral imagination and of spiritual hope is just deeply altered there. And since it doesn't seem to me to follow inexorably and necessarily from what preceded it, I see it as an interruption that for me really is the presence of God in history.
And if to blend our previous 2 inquiries into one, we have sort of the origin of the moral impulse being this transcendental direction, as it were, towards love, towards the good. And then we have this unprecedented epochal change. But then why is it that no pre-Christian or sort of ultra-Christian belief had this philanthropic urge, this altruistic urge that you identify with Christianity? I mean, the obvious answer to the question is there was no Christ. But having this imbued sense of moral direction, one that, as you say, may not necessarily have led to the teachings of Christ, why is it that this transcendental direction would not, of its own volition, have reached that outcome, or would it have by some other means?
Well, there were philanthropic and altruistic motives and teachings throughout the ancient world. I think, here I'll wax Hegelian. I'm often told I regard Hegel as a villain, which is not true. But one thing he makes correctly is one sense that in the what you may or may not be able to conceive in the abstract is not really going to be known and not really embraced and become fully subjective actuality, right? Or the actuality of living spirits without this concrete presence, this personal presence, to whom there is a relationship that is revelatory. All right, that's the beginning of it. There has to have been, it seems to me, an interruption of the natural course of things that wakened that, and I do believe there's a universal, necessary, transcendental longing for the good, but to have awakened it to objects of our love or of our moral attention that for most cultures would fall below the threshold of recognition. That required more than simply some kind of abstract sorting of ethical maxims. That requires a broken heart, awakening to yet a much higher level, or recognizing something that exceeds and surpasses what could be imagined just in abstraction. And especially the case that every moral school of the past tended to operate within the constraints of prudence, right? Wonderful biblical verses about leaving some fruit on the vines and grain ungathered, so that the stranger among us or the person who has nothing will have something to gather, but to forage. Wonderful Stoic teachings about kindness to your slaves. Well, I mean that, and which is different. Incidentally, I want to point out that when Christ is preaching to the very poor, when he's giving them practical advice, what he's also trying to do is to keep them out of slavery, not just in the metaphorical sense that they're enslaved to their creditors, but in the actual sense that this institute, all of Christ's teachings to the poor, in order to protect them against the depredations of the rich, are also attempts to protect them against having to sell themselves and their families into slavery. In Christ, there's an extravagance. I mean, there is a lack of economy in that love. I mean, give to everyone who asks. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Store no treasure up on earth. Who calls anything his own cannot be one of my disciples. A verse that, we should wrestle with more than we. And blessed are the patochi, the most abased.
Is that the poor in spirit in the King James?
Blessed are the poor in spirit in Matthew, and penevmati. But that's often people think the penevmati is added there to lessen the blow of the original, which you find in Luke, which is just blessed are the patochi. But actually, I think penevmati there is meant to make absolutely clear that these are the real patochi, the ones who really are shaken about, the ones who are absolutely pressed down. Even their spirit is crushed. They are entirely at the mercy of everyone else. They cower. They have to. I mean, that's what the word patochi means. Again, patokos is someone who trembles and abases himself in terror and in absolute desperate need. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What's different in Christ, I think, is the shattering of the prudent constraints that we place upon moral love and devotion to others. This is insane, to be honest. Had no thought of the morrow, what you shall eat. Trust in God so absolutely that you can give everything away to others. And why? Is it for your personal purification? Well, that's not the way Jesus talks. I mean, yes, it does save you from an evil in a sense. But actually it's the objects of those, this daughter of Israel, this man who's blind, it's the objects of that love who demand that from us, not our own personal spiritual odysseys. And I think that in Christ you have this transfiguration of the moral into something absolutely convertible with the religious, the spiritual, our very relation to God. It's not one thing among others. It's not the alms you give in a certain season as part of a larger obligation. Believe me, philanthropy, charity, it's right there in Jewish tradition. It's not breaking with it. He is a true Jew, a true child of Israel and of Abraham. He comes first to the Jews, and he uses the language of the prophets. Jeremiah and Isaiah ring throughout his teachings. But at the same time, there's a transformation going on in which he's taking something very deep in the Jewish inheritance and raising it to the absolute height of spiritual significant spiritual reality. And I just don't see that as something that just naturally unfolds. I mean, I think that we would always be ruled by prudence. Um, and even when you get to Kant and the categorical imperative and the total disinterest, that's a kind of etiolated moral absolutism that comes from the Christian tradition. You could not, I mean, Kant, I think that the way he frames the categorical imperative is wrong, and the way that he unites it to the knowledge of the rational freedoms of the self that can legislate for itself is defective, or at least weak. But at the same time, I recognize the moral beauty of the impulse as something that in his time was 1700 years old. It came from this absolute and uncompromising extravagance. But in the case of Christ, it's still love, and love in the sense not of just a dispassionate recognition of my duty, but genuinely the cultivation of an ability to see that in the least of these, you're looking at the face of Christ, you're looking at the face of the one you love, you're looking at the face of God.
In Euripides' Cyclops, which I was reading recently, written about 400 years before Christ,
Yeah.
there's a scene where Odysseus is trying to encourage the Cyclops to stop sort of tyrannically abusing his islander underlings.
Yeah.
And the Cyclops has a long speech in response in which he tells Odysseus his only god is wealth and property and personal pleasure and the self. And then he says, and it might be a quirk of the translation I was reading, but that moral justice is a vengeful lie practiced by the weak against the mighty, or by slaves against their masters. In any of its subsequent formulations in Nietzsche or elsewhere, have you ever been compelled or in a dark moment convinced by this idea of where these moral instincts come from?
Or for that matter, if we don't want to put it in quite this term, so say evolutionary psychology.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I think, well, when you get to Nietzsche, of course, you have to take him seriously because, good pastor's son that he was preaching a gospel. And there is great truth in you know, I do think, for instance, the way in which the doctrines of eternal torment developed, or other things of that sort. There is resentment. It's a justified resentment, the resentment of the slave or the poor against masters and oppressors. When Tertullian talks about, he hates the gladiatorial games, right? Things like that. But then he goes on to say, in the day of judgment, we'll have our own spectacle. Well, that's not, that's, first of all, that's a natural impulse. When I see ICE agents in this country now, right now, we have a little fascism problem going on in this country. You may have noticed. I don't know if you ever read the news. When you see them on the street, your natural impulse is to say, I want that person to suffer everything that he's visiting on others. I wouldn't mind seeing him burn in hell. All right. There's a natural moral impulse there. And if you're the victim of that, sure, resentment. And when you're aware of that, you begin to think, well, maybe this is always just a play of power. Maybe the moral law. Well, I mean, the moral law that the Cyclops does not want to acknowledge is restraint, right? Okay. In not abusing those who are subject to him, right? And there is a great deal of this in the ancient world, to act with restraint. But then I come back to Christ again and again, and he's not saying that. Restraint, of course. He's not simply condemning the Pharisees as whited sepulchres. He's proclaiming not the moral justice in that negative sense, but love and vision. I mean, absolute love for those who are rejected and despised, seeing in them not someone you owe something to, but seeing in them God, suffering and rejected, seeing in them Christ. Again, the inseparability of the moral love from an actual cultivation, I mean, of the moral law, rather, from an actual cultivation of genuine love, the breaking of the heart, metanoia, repentance, which really means a change of heart and change of mind, absolute transformation, alter the way you see reality. That that I don't see accounted for in Nietzsche. Nietzsche's only attempt to deal with Christ is absurd. He's this symbolist. He's a dreamer. He's the most flaccid version of the beautiful soul. Then you pick up the Gospels and you find this fiery prophet fiery in both senses, on fire with compassion and love, on fire with divine indignation and injustice, demanding hearts change. That's that figure, who is certainly not the imbecile that Nietzsche describes. He's not the idiot that Nietzsche describes. And so, yeah, when I have those moments of doubt, as I say, I think of things both great as well. I think of the teachings of Christ. I find them those doubts inadequate to deflect the force of the person of Christ, right? But also, again, I was like, when I look at a dog raising a cat, when I see, there's not just the imperative to accrue power to dominate and to survive in nature, even in nature. There is also generosity, compassion, love, the forging of bonds that are not contingent upon evolutionary advantage. And at the end of the day, the discourse of power, I just find, becomes more and more vapid, more and more banal, the more you try to apply it to that experience. And if one can learn to see things the way Christ has taught one to see them, even in just fugitive glimpses, I think it's impossible then to go back to this discourse of suspicion with real credence. I mean, you look at it and it begins to look absurd. I mean, much sillier than the claim that no, there really is a moral structure to reality in which we participate to the degree that we love others, not only those in whom we have a personal interest, as amplifying our power or our prestige, but actually finding that they have the power to break us apart. The discourse of suspicion ultimately is it loses its power for me altogether.
And I suppose the worry is these feelings of resentment, which can be identified and sort of put away. But the worry is that one does sometimes feel them and wonder where it comes from. And the Nietzschean argument is to say, well, this is the natural pre-existing format. We see this everywhere, and this is part of the human condition. And another argument might be that this is an element of the fall, or this is something that we have lost, but we can regain our former state. But when we expand our kind of moral genealogy or moral history into the animal kingdom, into the evolutionary line, I wonder, where do we first identify something like resentment as a bad or evil or negative sentiment? When is it simply, amoebas blobbing against one another in a sort of, moral nonplussed way? And when do we suddenly identify these moral decisions and this case where you have evil and you have good. And ultimately, by the time Christ appears, we can argue, well, we can overcome this natural tendency, which, as we say, the natural morality was tending towards or was trapped within. But the origin of that in the first place, that has to be conquered. Does it demand a fall of some kind, maybe sort of distant, transcendental? Does there need to have been a fall to begin with?
Well, I believe in a fall. I'm not a literalist. I don't believe that in the course of history, near the Euphrates, um, a man and a woman were deceived by a serpent. But yeah, no, I mean, I do believe that. Now, do I know it? Well, I know this. In that story, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of knowledge of good and bad, might be. I mean, that might be a truer way of saying it. It's just knowing what things are valuable, what aren't. In the original myth. But reading that story has an allegory of the relation of creation to God. The moral categories come only because that union, that immediate presence, that immediate communion with God is lost, right? And so whether you call it Maya or the fall or whatever, there has been an estrangement, and I think it does pervade all of creation. Yeah, isn't it interesting? I mean, we mentioned resentment. Resentment is itself a disappointed love. Okay, and it's a disappointed love it's been disabused of its expectations by abuses, by circumstances. Now, I don't really think animals experience resentment very much. Perhaps some of the more intelligent ones. I mean, I think like a dolphin may resent being confined and in a pool, and there have been cases of dolphins literally taking their own lives. Because they're in captivity. I mean, they simply go down and refuse to rise to take in oxygen and just pass away. So, but do they feel resentment? I hope not, because I think dolphins are higher than we are. But resentment, natural though it is, it's a very, if it appears in evolution, is a very late appearance as a kind of negative abstract expectation of justice. So already the natural appetite for the good, for justice, for love is there. You can hate someone who's done you a wrong, but ressentiment, the thing that Nietzsche's talking about, that's already a mysterious and sort of liminal reality in human nature. It's something that arises only because we're aware that not only do I have a desire for good, but you do as well. And so if you wrong me, the injustice, the falseness of your nature is apparent to me. I may resent it. I may instead just be indignant at it as Christ was, and as Christ also was, seek to dissuade you from it, that you might be changed, right? The present, I don't know, have you ever read Piotr Kropotkin's
The mutual aid.
No.
Mutual Aid?
Yeah,
This is an old
ages ago, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's an old issue within evolutionary psychology. The degree to which mutuality, but also the degree to which is something more than mutuality, something because even in mutuality, there's a calculation that we need one another, which may be true. I actually see in the teachings of Christ something that goes beyond that. But what we see in nature is even and a lot of good evolutionary science now would acknowledge this, that simply trying to understand things in terms of the survival of an immortal gene line, right? For instance, or kin selection, which that's odd anyway. I mean, that doesn't seem to fit the paradigm anyway. That there are clearly moral. I mean, they may be not moral in the sense that they're prior to any sense of the difference between good and evil, as we would name them, perhaps. But they look moral to me. There are moral relations throughout nature that simply exceed need. There are cooperative things, a mycorrhizomal network is a richly communicating interweaving of trees and fungi and other. There's a whole living sort of mind in a healthy living forest, say, and there's all sorts of mutuality. But I think in nature you also see that something that goes beyond that, something that wills the other before it wills itself, and and I don't know if I can prove it. And I've already lost the question that Milo asked me. I don't remember what we're talking about. Let's talk about otters. Have you ever noticed what darlings otters are?
I like what they do with their stones. They sort of rub, the stone rubbing thing.
Yeah, I like the sea otters holding hands, a classic.
Yeah. Oh, they hold hands. In fact, just as I said, I'm a sucker for this sort of footage. Watched a South Korean fellow running an aquarium being helped to clear out the pool with two otters. They're bringing very dexterous creatures, setting up the cones that had fallen in the water, putting them upright there. And then when it's all over, he lets them know that he taps each of them on one pole, then on the other pole, and on the nose, and off they go back to their play. But even this is extraordinary. I mean, why is it?
Yeah. Why is he doing that?
This sort of this sort of corrosive suspicion of motives. Years ago, in the experience of God, I talked about this claim that say when you give money to those overseas, it's because your evolutionary equipment has gotten confused and you're thinking of them as your own children. You've made a mistake, except that you haven't. I mean, you, the person giving that aid to people overseas, you actually do possess a discriminating consciousness. You know that these children will not continue your line, that you have to try to save a child in Somalia so that your family line will continue. You know that's not the case. Mm-hmm. You know that you have no evolutionary or in any sense practical investment in the love you have for your dog or your cat. It's overwhelming love. I mean, it's simply not accounted for by evolutionary biology. Oh, well, of course, it's just a displacement of a maternal or a paternal protective. No, it's not, because you are aware of what you're doing. You're not making that mistake, and your genes are not, as far as I know, deliberating agents. Anyway, your genes aren't very active at all. I mean, the gene, so insofar as there is such a thing, is a fairly dormant molecule. It's the system, but you who act and decide and perceive. And the failure to see this, I mean, it is so resplendently obvious, so overwhelmingly, insistently obvious, is a prodigy of willful blindness on the part of those who want to reduce everything to selfishness. I mean, Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, was moronic. Anyway, it sort of started this language of selfishness because it's all based on a metaphor. It's a metaphor that's defective. It's based on a science that was already out of date when the book appeared. It was almost 30 years out of date. And it's just that every general claim it makes is just obviously logically false. But he's not a fool. Why did he arrive at that? It's just a dogmatic training in this absolute reductiveness of everything to an evolutionary calculation of benefits. And yet we know if we're willing pay attention to reality, that this isn't true, that this is just another way of, filtering the information that we gather in the sciences, just like any other methodological fiction we use. Yeah, the crocodile eats its young because it has a drive to survive. The crocodile is not an exemplar of moral virtue that we would want to follow. Again, despite the fact that we've all occasionally thought about eating our babies.
But I suppose that's part of the motivation for these ideas is less the sort of destruction of good and moral motivation among animal kind and humankind, but rather the nullification of evil. Because you encounter things like crocodiles eating children and all the absurd evils that penguins commit among each other. And by devising the mechanistic evolution, you've managed to sort of remove evil from the animal kingdom, because in a way you see a penguin and you don't really attribute to it much in terms of virtue
or right now there's a civil war going on between what was originally one large community of chimpanzees. Sorry, I should let you finish your question.
Well, it's that perhaps there is that push that in mechanizing evolution and the animal world, instead of it being that kind of Herzogian realm of constant chaos and villainous interfeeding, it becomes an entirely neutral plane of just, A leads to B leads to C, and all creatures do what they do to survive, rather than acting as agents in any sense of being especially generous or being especially cruel. We can write it all off and live in this kind of slightly clinical but ultimately purified universe of, don't worry about the penguins.
To escape the Schopenhauerian vision of the whole cosmos being driven by this monstrous will.
The blind striving of the will. Yeah, no, what instead you see in nature is, again, a broken world in which forces of power do contend with one another, and yet again and again you see that logic being interrupted by, even among animals, these moments of pity, compassion. It's a very strange thing. I knew a person who once encountered a grizzly bear. And for those of you who don't live in a country where bears wander around, let me point out that the rule in America is, if it's black, you can fight back. If it's brown, you must lie down. This is something these children. Black bears are actually rather sweet, but if you scare one, it'll fight. But, if you fight it, it's not out to kill you. A grizzly bear will kill you, except when it doesn't. He encountered a female grizzly bear. If she had had cubs around, he would have been done for, I suppose. But he believes it was a female grizzly bear. Looked a bit gaunt and hungry, and came at him aggressively, and he lay down. But the bear kept coming, and then he started whimpering, pleading. The bear sniffed him and then drew back. And the damnedest thing, she reached out with her paw and touched him gently, and then went away. And he again, we don't know the circumstances of it, but he's so sure that at that moment, in that ursine brain, an impulse of pity overcame an impulse to eat or kill. And I see this, again, these friendships forged across lines of species, the sort of bonds that we forge with animals, that they forge with one another. If we want to reduce everything to a single moral principle, or a single amoral principle, we're just always trying to explain away anomalies in the picture. So with evolutionary psychology, you arrive at a place where it explains totally contradictory phenomena. Here's the evolutionary explanation of why a mother kills her cub. Here's the evolutionary explanation of why the mother doesn't kill her cub. And you realize all we're doing is is coming up with very fanciful narratives that aren't grounded in reality at all, and failing to see the actual phenomena before us, which is that there is love and mercy and inexplicable kindness, even amidst the tumult of nature, red in tooth and claw.
And we get this, well, just the opening scene of Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life just brought to mind, which you might remember.
The dinosaur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw that scene mocked. Of course, I never thought there would be a Terrence Malick film with CGI dinosaurs in it. So I've always thought that this is one of the oddest moments in the history of cinema. And I believe we're all cineasts. So, but I didn't find that absurd at all. I thought, that he's seeing, even, long before mammalian, let alone hominid kind are on the ascendant. He imagines moments of mercy, moments of strange spiritual transcendence, interrupting the flow of violence and need, and overcoming them. And I think that that's a true picture of nature. I'm not trying to be gauzily idealistic about it. I know exactly how savage the natural world can be. And again, I mean, I live in a country where you do have large predators about, and there is much more wildlife and more of the sheer carnage of nature than is now the case in the developed parts of, developed European countries. I'm not trying to idealize it, but we've seen it so often that it's a phenomenon that requires a different explanation from this sort of banal, reductive, evolutionary psychology.
Before we see the dinosaur in the Tree of Life, we have minutes and minutes of galaxies, dust clouds, nebula, sort of implying that the cosmic love is saturating the unconscious or the material world as well. It's saturating all this dust. That there is some, this line from Dante he mentioned.
The love that moves the sun
and other stars. Yeah.
And of course, I mean, Malick is the filmmaker who's worked with the greatest filmmaker to work with Christian themes since Tarkovsky, probably. I mean, I find that movie, that film, unbearably moving, especially in the long cut. I don't know, you can get the full version on Criterion, right up to that final vision of the sunflowers, where again, the love that moves the sun and other stars is vaguely echoed, and just this.
It really makes a baby look like a miracle, that film. The shots, the foot and the little, you get a bit of a nail, and it just makes it look extraordinary.
I'm not overly enamored of some of the films he made thereafter, but Hidden Life is very good, and
one of the best.
Yeah. I like the others, though. I like To the Wonder in many parts. I just, whether it ever all holds together, and the notion and the knowledge that all of Rachel Weisz's scenes were removed. I mean, that's just wrong. That's just evil. He will have to answer for that on the day of judgment.
The Rachel Weisz cut presented before the pearly gates. I've done it, Lord. I've done it.
God will bring him before the throne and say, "This is my edit."
Yeah.
Isn't
it much better? Look.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Will our works stand the test of that day? The fire, will they have to be destroyed by fire so that we can be saved as by fire? The final cut of To the Wonder may be the fire through which Terrence Malick will have to pass. But yes, no, I mean that the Tree of Life, that the whole thing, and I've actually gone to the IMAX presentation of the long version of the cosmic cycle that it was released as a separate film, and it's curious. It's at once a picture of just cosmogenesis, and on the other, it is his vision of the love that moves all things necessarily toward acts of love.
He's also quite
Well,
rare among American filmmakers, especially nowadays, of having kind of quite a pronounced social conscience,
Yes.
which is extraordinarily rare in American film. Didn't necessarily used to be. I mean, the between the war era, John Ford of all people made two kind of quasi-socialist movies, The Grapes of Wrath and How Green Was My Valley.
And also remember the court martial of what's the trial of suddenly I've forgotten the name of the character that Woody Strode plays in that, and Cheyenne Autumn, which are films of protest against the treatment of the Native people, the First Nations, American Indians, and against the treatment of Black Americans. I've heard, I think it was Quentin Tarantino years ago, say John Ford was a racist and an idiot, I've no doubt that as a young man he had a lot of the casual cultural prejudices of his time, perhaps. I don't know. When he first came to this country, I think he was an extra in Birth of a Nation. He was a Klansman or something. But he himself actually turned out to be a filmmaker with a social conscience. He was always both the Native peoples and Black Americans. He was more than aware of. So you're right, though, that now, I mean, there are well, first of all, I mean, I don't even know if I could name most of the directors working now in America. To be honest, I don't. I mean, I find the way film is made now that it doesn't. To be a commercial success, it's not just formulaic. It's formulaic visually. Is all done on digital in digital media, which to my mind, no matter how you work them, just lack the richness of film with a great cinematographer. It's just the saturated hues become instead this sort of pointillistic glare, and depth is it's very hard you don't get the same depth. So visually, films aren't interesting now, but also, for the most part, the sort of films that get made, I don't know. I just find them very hard to watch. So I don't even know if I could name any American directors of any significance right now. But we are going off on a tangent, I suppose. Although I don't think that's true, right? I mean, this whole little heterocosm you've created, where everyone is in front of a shoji screen, drawing their power from the mystical properties of pressed mulberry. You're allowed to go off on any tangent you like, right? That's
precisely,
especially at the hour mark. I mean,
you should actually call it tangents. That could have been the name of it.
What do you think of Disney, Walt Disney? How do you feel about him, about the studio?
Well, I'm not as anti-Disney as some are. The original Walt Disney, I think, the early cartoons. I saw recently somebody. I started using the Substack app, I have to admit, just to promote my Substack thing, because I'm trying to make as much money as I can before I change countries, which I'm supposed to do later this year. But also just I find myself at times when I'm waiting at a doctor's office, or I do regular therapy during the day and I can't read while I'm doing it because I have this neck and back condition. I'll just look at the Substack thing, and I saw someone Substack there. That's lots of people who think Tolkien was the greatest writer in the history of the world or something, and someone going on about how Snow White was just saccharine, and you could see why Tolkien hated it. It had no sense of good and evil. It was just saccharine children's stories. Well, wait a minute. I remember being taken to Snow White as a child when it was being re-released. It's a masterpiece of the animator's art, but it's also a children's story in which you've got an evil queen telling a huntsman to cut out a young girl's heart and bring it to her in a casket, poisoning her later, being chased to her death, falling to her death. I mean, it's not, it's still got enough of Grimm's fairy tales in it, but I think there was also a kind of artistic genius in the silly in the humor of the dwarves. I've got a nice Middle European sense of mixing the tragic and the absurd. How could you enjoy Kafka if it wasn't saccharine at all? So there are films made under Walt Disney that I admire as works of art. That would include Mary Poppins. Again, I apologize for Dick Van Dyke's accent. He has apologized for it lavishly in the past, but I think that film is a great work of art. It creates an atmosphere, a world to itself, and it's not just drawn from the books. The short stories in the books are very interesting because they're full of Gurdjieff, or however you would say it, Gurdjieff mysticism. And symbolism, but at the end of the day, they lack that atmosphere. That film creates a dream world. Again, whether the animated sequence is quite gel or not, I don't know. So yes, there's much that I like in the old Disney. Disney today is just any other studio, isn't it? And they do they do these superhero.
I was talking about the old ones, and I was just curious because you love children's literature so much. Alice in Wonderland, Winnie the Pooh.
Well,
when most people hear those now as titles, often the first thing that comes to your mind are the Disney pictures.
I hate those. I hate the Disney Alice. I hate the Disney Winnie the Pooh things. Those are obscene. Those are desecrations. Even the short thing they did from Into the Willows, which has been all but forgotten, which was not feature length, but all that was evil. Although it was well.
This is how Tolkien felt. This is we're seeing an interesting generation later.
Yeah, but he was he wasn't reacting to the ones that we're talking about now. Those came after, right? But yeah, no, there's much that Disney did that's evil. As I said, I'm not either all for or all against. I mean, today I don't want to watch films about people in spandex flying through the air and having, 20-minute long CGI battles. That doesn't interest me, and whatever else it is that Disney makes.
I don't
and you're right. You had to bring up Alice and Winnie the Pooh because now all my ressentiment is coming is surfacing, and I feel I have to attack Disney. But
because
there's a lot of rubbish that came out of that studio element. But the early stuff, look.
I think the first five films, it's Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, Bambi. I think it's 5 in a row. Fantastic films.
And the first live action film they did, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, is quite a good film. Yeah. It's not as great a work of art, but I mean, James Mason is a great Nemo, and I loved that film as a kid. And
I think in terms of evil, the main competitor to Disney at the time being Fleischer Studios. And there is a kind of evil that leaks out of what I quite enjoyed at times, but I feel the world in which Fleischer had been successful and Disney not might have been a sort of weird dystopia of extended arms.
Yeah, that's it. There's something, I think, just ever so slightly satanic in the aesthetics of the Fleischer. While I admit that they're impressive, I also feel that it was an open doorway to hell. It's like going in, or it's like the dream novel of Schnitzler, or what was it that Kubrick called his version?
Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah, that you go into what seems like just a masquerade ball, and suddenly you're in a world of orgy and violence. Dionysus pretending to be Apollo to lure you in. The true visit.
And you get Walter Lantz for Universal, almost completely forgotten, but he's like an even more evil version of Fleischer because the animation isn't even that good. It's just filth and squalor. But it's interesting to look at sometimes and imagine this could have been reality. It's a good mirror of the America of the 1920s in many ways, of the
I think
dark corners of it.
of all,
But Disney flew above.
yeah, I think of all the early
Go ahead.
those five first feature length animated, the Pinocchio. You certainly wouldn't call that film saccharine for the most part. I mean, there are cutish moments in it, but God, that is the book is quite terrible too. The original book, obviously,
Yeah.
but and so is the book Bambi. I mean, that's an anti-fascist tract, and Bambi's mother. There's a lot of darkness in those films. And in Pinocchio, the children being turned into asses, and the scene of what's the name of the whale that devours them, bearing down on them. It just fills three-quarters of the screen. When it was used to see these in the cinema because they would be re-released in those days. So I've seen it on the big screen. Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. And they animate every drop of water, so it's just horrific, that sequence in the cinema.
Yeah. So no, I don't. Of course, I'm not what you would call a devoted fan of Tolkien. There are things I enjoyed, things I thought were. I think The Lord of the Rings is a very mixed bag as far as art is. I love The Hobbit. Is just a good children's book, although even then Smaug is killed too easily too soon. I mean, even that they deal with the dragon. The book deals with the dragon too quickly. That's the only flaw in it. But otherwise, I would understand why he wouldn't want the Lord of the Rings made into a Disney film. It is true. It'd be the fear that Legolas would be dopey or something. So I can see his apprehensions there.
I've got a few authorial jewels that I prepared earlier, inspired by your preference for Tolstoy over Dostoevsky, which you recently wrote about on Substack.
As an artist,
yes. Yeah. On that, I kind of like what I like about Dostoevsky is that he leaves things unfinished. It's messy. It's more inspiring as a writer to read Dostoevsky because you think I could maybe finish some of this.
Isn't that the editorial impulse that's saying this is an imperfect work of art as well? Whereas with Tolstoy, when you get to
how do you get inspired by Tolstoy? It should be perfect.
Yeah, I know. It's sort of like Shakespeare, isn't it? But there are flaws in Tolstoy. I mean, no one, I think, enjoys the last part of Anna Karenina, learning about Levin's spiritual journey. I mean, it's not superfluous.
The War and Peace essays.
Yeah, the essays at the end, you could cut them off. Even then, though, I'm not so sure. Part of the power of War and Peace is that it is of such epic sublimity that it spills out of itself. It just spills out into the real world and becomes Tolstoy talking about the world.
Yeah. If it were anything other than the best novel in the world, I'd be with you. But those essays,
but you could cut the essays off quite happily. And you can. There is no. Bondarchuk, when he did his great film version, did not film the essays. Curiously enough,
big mistake, big
diegetic
error.
material. And again, Levin's conversion, or Tolstoy narrating his own conversion, it's not superfluous. Levin's story has to be finished in counterpoint to Anna's, but the way it's done just becomes didactic, and you feel Tolstoy already precipitating towards the flaws in Resurrection, again full of moments of brilliance. But the novellas of short stories, the Death of Ivan Ilyich, I think is just a perfect work of art. And for Dostoevsky, the only thing I think that he really finished and polished to a fine gleam was something that used to be ignored as a juvenilium, was the double. And there he's part Gogol, he's a premonition of Kafka, But yes, with Dostoevsky, look, I love the brothers Karamazov, and in Dostoevsky, there's something to wrestle with, not just in the sense of being inspired and to say, I could do this even better. It's their the chapters like Rebellion and the Grand Inquisitor and the
all the
teachings,
bits where the plot stops,
and the story of the woman in the onion and Yvonne's conversation with the devil. You know, all of your philosophical, your moral, your religious impulses have to wrestle with what's going on there. It is serious. I mean, Rebellion is, to my mind, one of the summits of Western reflection on good and evil, and on the terms of our existence. So I don't, what I say about Tolstoy and Dostoevsky is, yes, Tolstoy, to me, it's unarguable that he's the far greater artist. I don't even know why that would be an argument. You know, Dostoevsky wrote melodrama quite often. He wrote, you know, her throat was surging. She seized me. She had gone pale. You know,
people are often throwing themselves at each other. Yeah. He threw himself across the room.
He flung himself onto the carpet, trembling, pale as paper without writing on it. You know, it's so all over the top, and the characters are not really characters so much as they're collections, quite often just collections of antic gestures.
I find as soon as he stops, as soon as this stops, though, as soon as the plot stops, as soon as the melodrama stops, and all the characters sort of congregate in a room and are like, "Let's talk about
whether you can tergiversate." Yes,
yeah. Then it becomes amazing. He's amazing at the things,
and even some of the. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the night before Dmitri is arrested, Dmitri, when he's with Grushenka, I mean, there, Dostoevsky's real artistic gifts kick in, and he's really inspired. I just wish he could have sustained it. But my preference for Tolstoy, right? Tolstoy doesn't give me much to argue with. You know, I think he was a better Christian in many ways than Dostoevsky, but he was also a cold and remote Christian in a sense. His goodness was so principled that it often was inhumane. I mean, his relation with his wife, it wasn't just her fault. I mean, you know, she was living with a man who had transformed himself into a marble saint, and you can see why that's uncharitable, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, Tolstoy's not an anti-Semite. He doesn't want to make war on the Turks to recapture the Holy Land. He's, you know, he takes the teachings of Christ to heart, that you really are supposed to be loving your enemies, not killing them. Dostoevsky has moments like this when he's in pure transport, the love of Christ, and then moments when he's just everything but. And the anti-Semitism is revolting. I mean, if you've ever read a writer's journal, you can get it. You don't read Russian, right? But in English, there's been a full translation for a long time. And you know, there he is. He's using anti-Semitic slurs and then defending himself to those writing names. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm just even other Jews use these words of one another, which is, you know, like, say, you know, today. So I can use the N-word. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson can.
You heard any Nas albums?
You ever read? Go to a Chris Rock monologue. Yeah.
Another one I had lined up here is Oscar Wilde or G.K. Chesterton.
Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde. And I'll tell you why.
Anti-Semitism again.
Again, the anti-Semitism. I look, I mean, I know that people are of their time, but people who defend Chesterton, I'd say, well, everyone was a bit. No, in his day, he was raked over the coals by and Christians. I don't just mean Jewish, by Christians. You know, the charge of anti-Semitism was not something that people became aware of only in the aftermath. Anti-Semitism was not something people became aware of only in the aftermath of Auschwitz. Goodness, I mean, Dickens was so alarmed at the suggestion that Fagin was meant to be a caricature of Jews as such that he went out of his way in Our Mutual Friend to have heroic and noble and Jewish characters acting out of their Jewishness. It's not that they'd assimilated, you know. And I remember and Lewis Carroll, for instance, was horrified when he was doing his reading of Alice to children in hospitals when someone said, "Well, this is a Jewish hospital. You might not want to go there." And he was appalled that anyone would suggest that he would not want to read his books to Jewish children. I mean, hatred of Jews was an evil that was recognized long before Chesterton and Belloc came around again.
It really is everywhere in Chesterton.
And
The more you read of
every
him,
goddamned page, to be honest. I mean, even the Father Brown stories, there'll just be this offhand comment or a lie about history. Only the Jews were really free in the Middle Ages. What the hell is that? I mean, And then when near the end of his life, when the Nazis were rising in Germany, what's his attack on the Germans? They're too Jewish in their thinking. That's why they're Nazis. I mean, this is just absolutely despicable. Now, putting all that aside, Chesterton was a very brilliantly imaginative writer, but a monotonous one. The Father Brown stories all have basically the same trick, something that with any person with common sense who would just look would see this, but we always overlook it. And that's the answer to the mystery. And, the first time you read that, it's okay. The 17th time, you're beginning to get the idea. And it's the same with his paradoxes. They're just oppressively stupid sometimes. Some of them are clever, but mostly it's just a mannerism. In the end, and this voice of omniscient common sense. Well, you would agree with me if you just stopped being so perversely un-Chestertonian and not seeing reality as it is. That too is bluff and bluster and nonsense, and again tedious. And that's the problem with Chesterton. He had a shtick. He had 3 or 4 tricks that he just went back to again and again, like a bad illusionist. Oscar Wilde, for all his flaws, was always just purely Wilde, both with an E and without an E on that. So yeah, it may be true that he poured his genius into his life and only his talent into his works, but his works are finished products of a talent that's very, very engaging and also suffused with the genius of Oscar Wilde's life, which turned out not to be particularly rational and calculating genius in how to live, because it got him in trouble with the law, and he was so witty on the stand that he failed to defend himself against Rafe Richardson. Sorry, I don't know if you've ever seen the film The Trial of Oscar. Yeah. Robert Morley playing Oscar Wilde. Played brilliant. He was a bit long in the tooth for the role then, but he had played it on stage. So it would be Wilde rather than Chesterton. I think the importance of being earnest. Okay, it's just silly people talking in a particular, and he too, like Chesterton, can be repetitive in his jokes. He's always saying the counterintuitive thing. But I just
clever people are foolish.
I find it lighter and more self-mocking. There's less of if you just saw it the way I did.
Yeah,
if you were just Chesterton enough for Chesterton, whereas with Wilde, it's just being perverse in a way that's meant to make you laugh at yourself, not at Jews.
But Wilde didn't write The Man Who Was Thursday, which is
okay. But The Man Who Was Thursday is of course Chesterton's best novel. But then again, Chesterton hadn't fully become the Chesterton of later years either. He's not fully Christian yet. And even The Man Who Was Thursday, if you think about it, there's only, there's just a single plot line that repeats itself about 7 times in the book and then resolves. So even then he was repetitious. But yes, The Man Who Was Thirsty is a great book. I'm not trying to look. What's Wrong with the World is Chesterton's best essay, and it has some of his best writing. The last chapter is an absolutely monumental work of hortatory prose. I mean, of oratory. Not a hair of her head shall be touched. That's great. He was brilliant in many ways. But in the totality, the effect of the art, the effect of the personality that comes through the art, it would still be Wilde rather than Chesterton for me.
Yeah, I don't want to ask Ezra Pound or T.S. Eliot. It feels like a a minefield.
I can tell you there, I prefer the Ezra Pound of Cathay to the Ezra Pound of the Cantos, and so I would. It's a tie there. The early Eliot, I don't actually like the Christian Eliot very much. Curiously enough, for me, the after the Hollow Men, especially the things go downhill. I don't think of the four quartets as his masterpiece. I think they don't. The lines in them aren't as haunting. They're more didactic. They're more tendentious in a religious sense and philosophical sense. Whereas I find things like Mr. Apollinax, stays in my mind because of the strangeness of the imagery, So I would say early Eliot and the Pound of Cathay are equally dear to me. And I wish I could go back and prune out all the anti-Semitism
Charles Dickens,
Rachel May Rabinowitz, tears at the grapes with murderous paws. I mean, oh my God, Anyway, go on.
Dickens or George Eliot?
Well, in the totality, Dickens, just because there's more there that I want to go back to again and again. But obviously, Middlemarch and a few of the other Eliot novels are novels of almost Tolstoyan magnitude, Middlemarch especially. So that's a hard one. I suppose Dickens because I just enjoy, especially the late Dickens. I just reread Bleak House, and God, I love that book. I love the voice of the omniscient third-person narrator that's intercut with the first-person reminiscences. And I like the counterpoint too. Unlike, say, Harold Bloom or even Nabokov, who said that that this was a mistake. I actually think it works marvelously well. But man, Middlemarch is a book it's hard to argue with as being a candidate for one of, if not the greatest novel in English.
Mm-hmm. It sort of depends whether I feel like an adult or whether I feel like a child. I think George Eliot's much better at writing adults, and
right.
Dickens is the great childhood writer.
He is, but at the same time, he also has a very adult sense of the absurd. It's not one that a child would come up with. It's one that you can read as a child, especially when you get to the later books, Little Dorrit, Dombey and Sons, which is often an undervalued book, Bleak House, Our Mutual Friend. It's not, I'm not talking just about the darkness in those books. It's that the absurdity itself is an extraordinarily artistically crafted absurdity. Now, whether he should have put in death by spontaneous combustion in Bleak House has been an old argument. I love it because it's hilarious, but he apparently actually believed that this was a possibility. It was, many at the time thought it was, and it is funny. I mean, you have to, Mr. Crook just bursts, being so vile that he just finally bursts into flame. It's consumed, and then when he's dead, it leaves a kind of disgusting
slime
on the walls. It's just, can the two of you excuse me? You can edit this part out. You know how to edit your recordings? Yes. I just need to go next door and get some more coffee.
A simultaneous return. This is very impressively timed.
The elixir of life. It's actually horrifying both how strong the coffee is I drink and how much of it I drink in the day.
How many cups? What does it rack up to?
Well, cups, mugs, really. A cup would be about 8 or 9. I think it's so what would that be? 16 to 18 cups. So
Goodness gracious. Well, no wonder your sleep is a bit funky. And Balzac, like he had to resort to eating the raw beans eventually. Balzac's writing schedule is the most crazy in history. He would stay up the whole night talking to
yeah,
people.
yeah, it's obvious, and then
Yeah.
and yeah.
And right in the mornings, fall asleep for the
Well, I
majority
mean,
of the day.
again, I have very mixed feelings about Balzac. I think less would have been more in his case. Fewer novels worked over with a finer set of instruments. But when he's good, he's very good, and like there's this overflowing. Like I think that Rodin's statue of him somehow captured this as a sort of figure of titanic energy.
Yeah.
He's wrapped in this huge robe, and what's going on under those robes? There's been all sorts of speculations. Of course,
I like
it's
his
sort of like Rodin himself, who was this monster of erotic energy. He go into his studio, and it was full of naked ballerinas, and he's sketching, and then predictably, like at the end of every hour, would go into the next room where his mistress was, and for his constitutional, so to speak. And people like that, I don't know what to make of them. I need the coffee to keep going. So, and maybe Rodin was a heavy coffee drinker too. That could be it. I often think that the discovery of coffee in Europe is what led to the sudden surge of activity that produced early modernity, and the sudden. I believe that all of German philosophy in the modern age was the effect of coffee. That Kant without coffee would have just been a tailor or a ribbon clerk. Sorry, and
thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to be merciful to you. I know you were born English, sort of like being born without a sense of taste. No, I'm joking. I love the English. I'm married to an English woman.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I'd like
in fact, I'm supposed to be living. I might be moving to Wales, but probably in England. So yeah, no,
West Yorkshire, lovely part of the world.
If I could have, right now,
Wales is looking cheaper. Oh, the Malverns,
it's looking good. That's it. Because being a writer, we can settle wherever I like. I have to admit, I keep going on like, oh no, of course, Northumbria. I could pretend to be Basil Bunting and wander. Brave, sweet tenor bull, descant on Rathy's madrigal. Yeah, all right, sorry. Do you know Basil Bunting? Brig Flat?
Milo.
No,
Where are this pop culture?
Is this? No, I don't know. Or am I?
One of the great
poet,
English, Northern English poets of the 20th century. I used to. It always annoyed me when I would have a passion for someone or something that was little known, and then it caught on, because then I was no longer special. I was a Basil Bunting fanatic long before, but then in recent years, I even saw him quoted in a baseball article in Canada. And John Cooper Powys. No one in America knew who John Cooper Powys was. John Cooper Powys.
Okay.
Yes. Please. Great Welsh lunatic, and his brothers T.F. Powys and Llewellyn Powys, and they had lots of other siblings as well. And no one, and then suddenly Overlook Press was printing him in this, and, every high school English teacher knew who John Cooper Powys was, and I felt that I had been wronged.
I believe that to be
true. On the one hand, I want to share these enthusiasms with the world, but I want them still to be recherché and almost occult.
Yeah, or at very least you get a little footnote every time he's mentioned DBH.
David Bentley Hart, John Cooper Powys. You'll notice similarities between them. Both use all three of their names.
Thomas Mann or Hermann Hesse?
Robert Musil.
Okay, that's a good.
Again, Mann and Hesse are both flawed in my mind. Hesse's books are shorter, so I guess that I recently read Joseph and His Brothers, and there is a lightness in Mann that's lost in the old English translations. I mean, they were done in this sort of, especially Joseph and His Brothers, in this fake biblical style that doesn't really in the German. As I take it, Jack, you read them in German, right? So
Yes.
yeah, there is more lightness, more wit, more humor than always comes through in the translation.
Yeah, we
But
read the Magic. Like we had an interview about a Magic Mountain for the new translation for Oxford World Classics that was done
Yeah.
recently to celebrate it coming out of copyright. And from what I read from extracts and from speaking with the guy, it seems more of the humor is coming across than in the whole.
It's a very funny book. I like the Magic Mountain Cry. Now, it's not a novel in the Tolstoyan sense at all. Buddenbrooks is, but the Magic Mountain is something else. So I guess, yeah. All right, I'll say this: for the Magic Mountain alone, and for moments in all of the other books, and for the Confessions of Felix Kroll,
Yeah.
which is hilarious. I guess I would say Mann gives me more that I enjoy going back to. In Hesse, there's not the wit, there's not the sort of urbane detachment in the same way. But there's a lot of Hesse I enjoy. I like the Glass Bead Game. I like Damien and Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf. And of course, I'm just of an age for whom Siddhartha occupied, and it was right there with Aldous Huxley and a few other things we all read.
The big hippie
gave
books,
us
yeah.
gave us the key to reality, and let me chill out with some Vonnegut. Now, I'm not quite old enough though, but I had brothers who were of that age, and so I was sort of a child of the 60s who was born midway through the 60s, but temperamentally more of the 60s than of the later period. So there's a lot that, so Hesse has a kind of sentimental presence for me. But yeah, in the end, Mann. But Musil, I would obviously think greater than either of them.
It's one of those, it's sitting on the shelf. I know I'm going to love it.
Mann ohne Eigenschaften.
Mann ohne Eigenschaften. It looks great, but there's many short books on top of it. Yeah.
Just lesen. Yeah.
As another man of the 60s thing, I'm curious what you think of like Atlantis people. Like the modern Atlantis people, the Graham Hancock types. The world was a civilization before the Ice Age that was intercontinental, and all subsequent human civilization comes from that.
Is that a serious question, or are you just playing toying with me like a mouse between
I'm
the
toying with you.
We all agree with this, right? We're all on board with the Atlantis thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I believe also the pyramids were built by reptilians. And Easter Island. I mean, what could have produced the stoneheads of Easter Island other than extraterrestrial technology? So. Now, it was an extraterrestrial technology in pursuit of what was a primitivist revival in their aesthetic. So it's impossible to tell these heads from things that anyone could have created. But I think it's obvious. Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah. No.
Just of the conspiracies, there's a certain
the thing
kind
is, that's not really
it.
not. They may have come along in the 1960s, but that sort of new agey thing is a little later. In the 70s, there was a fascination with cryptids and UFOs. And so when I was a kid, every other book seemed to be about aliens or about Bigfoot or about the Loch Ness Monster in the 70s. In the 60s, it's more a case of flower children against the war, looking for transcendence, mysticism, psychedelics, the Grateful Dead, does Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band give us the key to a reality that we didn't? Is there? You wouldn't believe how much people thought just the Beatles were in the know about something. what it was, or they just knew something about what music to make next and what it meant, and everyone else was just trying to understand. That's the 60s. 19, the stuff about Atlantis, the Bermuda Triangle, again, in the 70s, that was really fun. That was, television programs about it, television movies about the Bermuda Triangle. But yeah, I don't have much taste for that kind of thing. I have to admit.
It's just annoying. It's just an annoying, like, it's not
but
true. Stop
I'm
it. But...
yes. Now there are in a sense lost moments of civilization. I mean, for instance, in parts of North America, there are the remains of large engineered structures equipped like the ones in Mexico and further in South America, the Mayan and Aztec. Choctaw culture in Alabama, and before the Westerners arrived, was creating structures that have now just mounds. So there are, so there's evidence of things that have been lost to the past that someone like Graham Hancock, I imagine, I haven't actually read him, but I've seen him on a documentary once or twice, because I have to admit that every once in a while you get in the mood for, I'm going to watch a documentary about UFOs, age of disclosure or whatever. And just amuse yourself with them. But then he'll weave them all together, and there were these great, I don't know, causeways that are now sunken beneath the ocean, and you can prove it because there's smooth stones down there or something, and this all leads to this giant civilization and people who knew how to cross the ocean and come from the sea and bring amazing technology to, and it's preserved in the myths, and it wouldn't be preserved in the myths, it would be preserved as people saying, these people from what would have been preserved would have been actual accounts. But yeah, why did you ask that? Oh, although I'll tell you
the 60s, and you're one handshake away from him with two people as well. With McGilchrist has done like several interviews with Graham Hancock, as has Sheldrake. But go on.
Yeah. No, I like people on the edge there. Okay, I don't mind that. It's when the narrative exceeds the evidence and exceeds reason. But for instance, I don't mind. Since we're talking about the 60s, I liked Carlos Castaneda's books, even though they're totally made up. They do actually contain fragments of actual lore. But even if they're just reading them as fiction, having a conversation with a lizard, moments like that, I do kind of like that stuff. That also takes me back to childhood. It's funny, I realized only recently just how very bookish people were in my youth compared to what they are today. The school libraries, even middle school, even elementary school, were filled to overflowing, and the books were constantly being taken out and read. And one of the first things the teacher said in coming into the room was, "Okay, put your books away," meaning it might just be science fiction, but it might be something. As people read all the time, and so these books are just part of the imaginative but also literary culture we were inhabiting together when I was young, and that's just not the case now. I mean, that's people are on their phones, but they're not reading books, and so that kind of shared imaginative world has been displaced by something closer to kind of nervous psychosis of web memes in a constant fluid tumult. And I think it creates a very different kind of sensibility. I mean, what will you be nostalgic for in a totally virtual age? If your whole life you've just been immersed in this medium that doesn't change, it just gets upgrades. Oh no, I'm nostalgic for 3.0.16. I mean, this
Well, I have seen this actually. I've seen people see like the old YouTube layout with the star ratings and it before likes and dislikes. and genuinely, like, a tear comes to their eye.
The
Ah,
Windows
those are the
XP
maybe.
days.
background, that the
Maybe,
Windows XP.
yeah. Who can understand the mysteries of the human heart? You can be attached to all sorts of things. You can fall in love with index cards, I guess.
Love
I miss,
saturates the
I
entire
miss,
universe.
right. I miss old card catalogs. I know you go into a library, you can do a much quicker search on the computer, but I just miss the romance of pulling out that drawer and flipping through the cards and going, someone put this in the wrong place. Damn it.
Yeah, but I await the first sort of nostalgic film or novel, but about these things, about like an early iPhone, but really, lavishing it. Like, the button at the bottom was such, it gleamed as you pressed it. We know
Yeah.
not these things now. We're in a
Yes.
buttonless age. I
The
weep reading
children
it.
don't understand. How is it human beings could once create things like this? And there'll all be pictures of cathedrals. It'll be, yes, the second
The
generation
iPod.
of iPhone. Yeah. That's when human civilization reached its zenith.
Ecclesiastes or the Song of Songs?
Oh, that's no fair. They're both, both of them, especially in the King James. Come on.
Not allowed. Robinson Crusoe or Gulliver's Travels?
Or Gulliver's Travels.
Yeah.
Gotta be Gulliver's.
Yeah, I mean, well, Gulliver's Travels is funny. Robinson Crusoe is boring. I'm sorry to point this out. It's a really boring novel. I say this to someone. Now, of course, I read it at the age of 10. So maybe that wasn't the right age for Daniel Defoe. Well, the Journal of the Plague Year thing, of course, or Defoe on pirates. But I mean, Robinson Crusoe. But no, Gulliver's Travels, of course.
Yeah, the great misanthropic book, the great hate saturating the
But
entire
always remember, the cynic is always an inverted romantic. If you find a real cynic,
he's so
you've
disappointed.
someone with a tender heart who has been disappointed by reality. So there's something there that's a kind of enantiomorphic love. No, sorry, a reversed image. I don't know why
Yeah, the
I
lawyers
used that word, but
in his mind, the lawyer was this beautiful, godly being, but encountering the lawyer in reality, god damn it!
yeah, you can't be a cynic if you weren't a romantic to begin with. You just can't. I
There's a curious thing at the end of Gulliver where I really do want to just spend some time with some yahoos, with some human beings. It makes, because the horse paradise is like this fascist hell. You kind of, it really makes you, the Hueenums.
I mean, that's just brilliant. By the name he gives them is just brilliant. It's like, it took me. I read it first as a child, and then it was like the fourth or fifth or sixth time I got to where I realized it was a horse neighing. And
But you really want to climb into the trees with the ape man. This is the better world up there.
Yeah. No, I love Dean Swift all the way. I mean, it's just one of the figures that sometimes he could be as vile as Smollett, but the anger that he expressed, I mean, and you see it in A Modest Proposal. I mean, this his burning sarcasm is the effect of a deep pity. I mean, for the oppressed people of Ireland.
These two don't really share a time period or a nationality, but they have the same initials. Walt Whitman or William Wordsworth?
Wordsworth. Wordsworth at his best. The thing about Wordsworth is that there was no great poet who wrote more bad poetry in later years. What's that? I can't remember
who wrote extraordinary. 45 years of it.
Yeah, that spoof of Wordsworth. There are two voices. One is of the deep. So when Wordsworth is great, he's great. And then in later years, he's writing poetry in praise of the telegraph wire, and things. It's like, oh Lord, there are times when you really shouldn't have lived much longer than Keats or Shelley.
I
longevity is a curse. For he's like poor Tithonus. He's just getting worse and worse as things go on.
Or The Simpsons, the genius of American
Yeah, yeah,
television, and then
yeah. I mean,
decades and decades.
the first 3 or 4 seasons are masterpieces of a very American kind of very fast and corrosive wit. And then it just went on for what, 30, 40? What's it coming
it's
up?
infinite, yeah. It's just
But
yeah.
some of
still
those
going.
early seasons have moments that I rank among the greatest moments of mass media. And one
I was
episode.
hoping that you would say human literature there, but mass media is good too.
Well, maybe. I remember there's an episode that apparently isn't shown anymore because I believe it had Michael Jackson doing the voice of the perfect person who thinks he's Michael Jackson. So it's one of those that's been expurgated because the pedophilia thing. You're only allowed to be president if you have this problem. When Homer's shirt accidentally gets turned pink in the washer because Bart threw in something red in there, and it's the only clean shirt he has, and I can't go into work. I'm not popular enough to be different. But anyway, he goes in, and you see all these people crowding in their white shirts into the nuclear facility with one pink, and then it zooms back to Mr. Burns' office. And who is that man? Oh, that's Homer Simpson. But the line that follows was, well, judging from his outlandish attire, he seems to be some sort of free-thinking anarchist. These color monitors are beginning to pay for themselves already, and they haven't taken off to an insane asylum. And one other that I remember. So, this is going to go on the record. Me remembering episodes of The Simpsons, puncturing the myth of someone who wants to pretend to be an Olympian, absorbing only high culture and baseball, which is high culture. Speaking of which, there's a game about to start, so this conversation might be wrapping up soon. I'm just warning you. Okay. Actually, my goodness, how long have we been talking? Almost 2 hours?
Yeah, goodness, yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Well,
you two are just starting. But Bart goes into a comic book shop, and it's being run by this fellow who's, scraggy beard, thinning on top, but a ponytail. His T-shirt is too short, too tight. It shows his stomach. He's got glasses. Bart says something. He takes to be rude, and he gets angry and says, "Listen, I didn't take a master's in folklore and mythology just to be pushed around by brats like you." Oh, this is sheer genius. I mean, that is so exactly right. Alas, you're right. It's gone downhill, and Wordsworth and The Simpsons have much in common in that regard. Just went on for too long.
10 years.
And I'm not as anti-Walt Whitman as I pretend. I just don't think there's any one poem that succeeds all the way through. But Song of Myself, when I was young, when I was still aware of the force that through the green fuse dries the flower, or, I was singing in my chains like the sea or whatever. When I was young and reading Dylan Thomas and Walt Whitman and all those things you do when you're, noticing girls and really for the first time, really noticing, oh, there's more there than I realized, I loved a lot of that, and there's much, and I love, of course, Whitman's at an angle from, but in that whole period of American 19th century literature is something I love. It was Melville and Hawthorne and Emerson and Thoreau were all unlike anything that the old world would have produced, and so was Whitman. So he gets points for that. But the early Wordsworth at his very best is one of the greatest of English poets, and so he gets the laurels, even though they're withered and dry and falling from his brow by the end.
Yeah, both of them also, aside from the initials, they make you really want to go out and notice the grass.
Yeah, and this is true. Even to be honest, even at his didactic worst with Wordsworth in the Prelude, I like the early full version of the Prelude better than the later version. Obviously, I hope most people do, but even there, yeah, they do send you back out into the world, and given the age we're living in, where we're destroying the natural world and living in virtual reality, they're both two poets who might have a prophetic importance for us now.
Mm. When is your baseball? Should we round towards the end now? I'm very
10
baffled
minutes,
by this.
8
10
minutes.
minutes, yeah. I watched a just like in a mindless space. I find it fascinating watching sports that you don't understand at their most epochal moments. So I watched this Japanese player Shohei Ohtani. I watched
Shohei Ohtani, if you want to do it Western. Yes.
Yes, and the commentators were just hemorrhaging, weeping with joy. They couldn't believe what they were saying, and I had no idea what I was saying. He seemed to be
what he was doing was impossible. If you're talking about that game in the playoffs that he both pitched and hit 3 home runs in, baseball is an impossible game to play at that level. Okay, this is something that has to be appreciated. To play at the highest levels, you have to be an elite athlete in any sport, and it's not the toll it necessarily takes on the body that makes baseball so. It's that the skills required are so diverse; they don't have any natural connection to one another. To have that hand-eye coordination to be able to hit a pitch or to throw, and I could spend hours just explaining the different kinds of pitches and with or to be a great fielder, a great base runner, Ohtani does all of that at the highest level. Now you don't see him in the field because he's a pitcher, so they're not going to put him out in the outfield and risk him getting an injury. But he's their best. Well, he's not necessarily their best pitcher. They have another Japanese pitcher as their best pitcher on the Dodgers, but he's one of the great pitchers. He's the greatest pure power hitter in the game. He's the best base runner and base stealer of his time. His speed is unbelievable. If you put him in the outfield, for instance, he would win a Gold Glove every year for his range, both with his legs and the power of his arm. And he does it with the ease of a god who is laughing at us. He finds our amazement amusing. Yeah. There have been great players in my time. My childhood hero, Frank Robinson, great player. We've never seen anything like Ohtani. I mean, he simply is the perfection of the baseball player as a type, and baseball is so hard to play. And there's something called 5 tools players. That means you can hit with power, field, throw, and run the bases. Okay, that's all. It just means being able to do those 5 things at a very high level. But he's a 6 tool player because he's also a pitcher. There have been other great hitters who were pitchers. Babe Ruth started as a pitcher, and he became but he was not great at all those other facets of the game. He was an adequate outfielder. He was a better base runner than you might expect for a man carrying more than his fair share of weight as the years went on. But Ohtani, it really is, it's like, obviously Zeus had an affair with your mother. Because there's something more than merely human in you.
I think the commentator was saying...
I shouldn't say that. I'm probably not. I've just insulted a very loving and good Japanese family. I take that back. But when you see someone like Ohtani, not Ohtani, you might think demigod, not strictly human.
So is Jack like a foreign tourist who attended the premiere of Hamlet, thinking, what is going on up there? Everyone weeping around him. I don't get it.
Yeah. The commentator's quote, I believe, was, "You never know what's going to happen to you in life, but I can guarantee everyone watching this, you will never see the likes of this again."
Yeah,
I thought
that game,
my kind of sports commentary.
There have been great games. Yeah. Game 6 of the 1975 World Series is legendary. But yeah, no, I mean, what he did that night, just, and the thing is, I've seen him play. It's his speed and grace too. I saw him hit a triple. That is, he got a hit that got him to third base, right? He got to third base. Mostly when someone hits triple at the last moment. He's sliding in, diving into the base just before the throw comes in, right? Otani was just striding around, loping around the bases with these long, even strides, and then came to a standing stop on third. And I realized he had done that. He didn't look like it was making any special effort at all at a rate. He had done it so fast that he'd gotten to third in the time that most runners running hell for leather and leaping through the air would not have been able to match. And I just found this uncanny. It just.
I suppose it's what sport's for, isn't it? It's to get those uncanny. Like, what am I even? What? How is this even? It's quite it's beautiful looking at human bodies moving and transcending it.
Great athletes, like great artists, like anything else, remind us of the beauty, the grace, the transcendent grace of which humanity is capable when it's doing something intrinsically worthwhile, like writing a poem or playing baseball, and not doing something squalid and degrading like running a country or a corporation.
I hope you find somewhere in the UK with some sort of baseball anything. Is there
that's the thing, is giving up live attendance. You can now stream. I mean, whenever I'm in England, even when I'm in Australia, I still watch the games. It comes at different hours. In England, the problem is I have to do it very late at night, whereas in Australia, it was just doing it at breakfast because you're so far ahead. I'm watching a game from, say a night or even a day game from the States while I'm sitting there eating breakfast. England's a problem, I have to admit, the 5 or 6 hour difference. Yeah, but I'll make it. I'll make it. Well, when they play West Coast.
Yeah, there's in London, there is a stadium that is used for some MLB tour.
Yeah, when MLB is on tour, yeah. It is a beautiful game. Someday, when I feel that you're spiritually ready, okay, when you've reached a level of spiritual attainment, now that involves also liking cricket from where you come. You at least have to like cricket. I'll try to induct you into the mysteries, the higher mysteries, the mystery religion of baseball. I'll try to explain what's going on.
This would be
I don't think you're ready for that. You're not ready for that yet. But the day will come when you can snatch the pebble from my hand before I can close my fist. You will have learned. I don't know if you know what that's a reference to, because again, you're too young. Kung Fu, very good. Yeah. Yes, Master Han. Quite changing. Very good.
Always a pleasure, David. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
The time.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to. Well, let's talk again sometime.
Yeah, I'll send over the poem as well.
Do that, yes, please. And again, you can edit the part out of this where we went to get coffee, because people don't want to see that.
Probably not.
Okay. Take care.
Unlikely.
Take care. Bye-bye.